What's going on, Los Angeles, LAFB fam, Bruin Nation, the Thriller and Madman, your dynamic duo, back together again for all things UCLA football. And first of all, it's so great to have my brother from another mother. I'm so happy, Thriller, that you got some incredible family time this weekend in St. Louis, and just excited to jump into it with you. My goodness, it's been a wild last 4 or 5 days in Bruin land. I know you and I have been feverishly texting one another, and we got a really fun show here about looking forward, looking ahead. But just first and foremost, great to see you, my brother. How we doing, and how you feeling?
Hey, just getting back from St. Louis, did anything monumental happen this week?
No, you didn't miss much. You really didn't miss much. This should be a slow roll. Yeah.
You didn't miss much. Yeah, got some great time in with the family. But, it's kind of come to a head. You know, the DeShaun Foster era, he was asked out this weekend. We had a coach that just left the program today that, I grew to really like, especially after some of those press conferences and getting to know him a little bit on that. But, like they say, at its darkest point, there's dawn on the other side of it, and I think UCLA, if they can make the right hire, which we're going to get into on this episode, they can get out of this darkness and get back to the light that we expect with UCLA football.
Back into the light, indeed, Thriller, and very excited about this show in particular because this show is all about looking forward. The last few episodes for us, we sort of report, we analyze, we monitor exactly what the pulse and the needs are for the team and for our community of fans that we care about so dearly. And, there's been some heavy episodes, these last few episodes with everything that's gone on. So I'm very much looking forward to, thinking about the art of the possible and really sort of being able to put our dream caps on of where we go from here. It's always a unique time when anything, it's almost like, you're single again, and like you're back in the dating world. And it's like, all the possibilities, it's the possibilities make things exciting. But before we jump into what's forward, Thriller, you alluded to it. Yeah. We have to address this. Very sad with heavy hearts. We report that defensive coordinator Ikaika Malloy and the Bruins mutually parted ways. Tim Skipper in his first press conference today. And I must say, Will, he was very engaging. He went and kind of shook hands with all the media members that were there and, said some really nice things. But unfortunately, Ikaika Malloy and the Bruins sort of mutually part ways here moving forward. Ben Bulch, our friend from the LA Times, reported from an unnamed source that for Malloy, I think he just really struggled with the DeShaun Foster firing and couldn't sort of bring himself to move on from that. And I think he sort of blamed himself in so many ways for that. And I think he was just really struggling internally and emotionally. And I think just kind of needed an opportunity to reset and recharge. And we wish Coach Malloy nothing but the very best. I'll still never forget that press conference last year when the team was 1-5, how emotional he was, how authentic he was, how much he genuinely cares for his players. And so when you see that, it's hard, not to believe that he's taken the events of the last few days very, very hard. But we know that Ikaika Malloy is a very talented and up-and-coming defensive coordinator. I think the sky is the limit for his career, and we're very excited to see where he lands after he takes the requisite time he needs to sort of emotionally recharge. And we're just wishing him nothing but the best and really profound success. Thriller, your thoughts on the Ikaika Malloy news?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I think he was almost too pure of a person for a job like being a defensive coordinator, because you mentioned it, man, the Hawaii speech last year, he breaks down in tears just saying how much he loves those kids in that locker room and how much he wanted to will their success. And he takes the losses hard, man. I feel like he was almost one of us. Like when they lost, they were down. He was down the dumps. When that kind of second half emerged last year, when we're beating Nebraska and Iowa, he's cheery, he's excited, he's getting ready. You could see how much he cared about the university, the kids, and the people that he developed, throughout the line. And, I saw a tweet from Adam Gorney, who's the Rivals recruiting expert. He said, this is not a great move in terms of recruiting because so many of the defensive players that had committed on the defensive line that we had coming in and, Anthony Papa Jones and Yaya God and some of these names, they decommitted. And a huge part of that was not even Foster leaving, but Kaika Malloy leaving in general because of the relationships he's been able to build with some of these kids coming up. So pure soul, man. It sucks that it had to go down this way, but with just how the defense looked through 3 games and how the team looked through 3 games, it's kind of one of those situations where I think we may have to burn down the whole house before we start rebuilding it again. And we wish nothing but success for Kaika Malloy moving forward. I know he's going to land on his feet somewhere because he's such a great person and cares so much about the kids that he recruits and coaches. So we wish him nothing but the best. But a sad day indeed. Tim Skipper, coming in, he was an interim coach at Fresno State. A lot of positive vibes from him coming from the Fresno State community saying, you're lucky to have this guy in the building. I'm a big John Middlecoff listener who does some shows with Cowherd. He was, at Fresno State. So he's a Fresno State alum. He's very close to the program. He was like, UCLA is very lucky to have them, come on in with Tim Skip. So, yeah, man, it's we'll see what he's made of. He's digging himself out of an 0-3 hole right now. And, unfortunately, it's the bear of the schedule. It's the Big Ten officially coming now. But any progress at this point is much appreciated for UCLA fans. So hopefully Tim Skipper can, put some juice in this team and hopefully get some life out there. I'm not even talking about wins, but even if we're close in some of these games, I think it would be a huge benefit to UCLA fans and people like ourselves that cover the team week in and week out.
No, really well said, Thriller, and lots to unpack there. 2 things that I think really come to mind. One is Kaika Malloy and DeShaun Foster, to your point, were terrific recruiters. And, the connection that both of them built with the players, particularly in this 2026 class, was significant. Let's not forget, Will, according to Rivals, according to 247 Sports, this was the number 23 recruiting class for 2026 prior to these decommitments, and some outlets had it even higher. And so, I mentioned this on the last show. I think, Will, we have to think of this rebuild as a 2-year process. It's a rebuild in 2025 and a rebuild in 2026. And then it's kind of that step function. You're hoping to make that jump in 2027 because the timing is unfortunate here. You're only going to get a new head coach around November. And, the commits for class of 2026, they've built that connection with the Fosters and the Malloys. And so we're expecting more decommits. I think it's only going to be natural. Yeah. And so the new coach is going to be very much behind the 8 ball in terms of 2026 recruiting. It's going to have to be a bit of a patchwork roster, leveraging significantly the transfer portal for that 2026 season. And then you start having more of your players, more of your philosophy in 2027. So I think we got to think of this in terms of 2 years. And Will, your other point about Tim Skipper, I think the talk about positive vibes is so true and so well said. He's bringing in enthusiasm and an energy, and he actually kind of reminds me a little bit of what Coach O, Ed Orgeron, brought to USC when he was in an interim capacity there after all of the turnover at SC in the 2010s for that 1 year. And so if Tim Skipper can have an Ed Orgeron-like impact, I think that's going to be so terrific for these players to be able to salvage this season in an emotional way, as well as from a wins and loss perspective. But also, Will, let's not forget, I think the optics, the politics, the need, I don't think it would suffice for Martin Jarman to say, okay, Tim Skipper is going to become our permanent coach in 2026 and beyond. But I think this is a tremendous job interview opportunity for Tim Skipper for his next job. Let's not forget, he was interim at Fresno State last year. They were 7-7. Now he gets another interim opportunity. Look, Tim Skipper has the opportunity to audition for some jobs here. And so I think that's a really unique interplay. It's about salvaging the season emotionally for these players, but also a tremendous opportunity, I think, for Tim Skipper to be able to audition for where his next spot is going to be, because I think he looks the part, Will. He's now going to have about 20-plus games of head coaching experience in an interim capacity between Fresno State and UCLA. There's a really nice resume there for him to be able to get a next job. And we're very excited for Tim Skipper as well. And so now, having said that, Thriller, it's what the conversation we've been waiting for. What is the art of the possible? Who do we like? We've seen a lot of things. Pete Nakos has said some things. Bruce Feldman has said some things. It feels like the Twitter world is buzzing over UCLA's next head coach and opinions, and some candidates seem way out of left field. Some candidates maybe seem too tame. It's just all over the place right now. But I'm just going to hand it over to you, Thriller. Who are your top 3 to 5? We can talk about it. I can give you my top 3 to 5. We can talk about it, and then we can sort of converge from there. So, Thriller, the floor is yours. Who do you really like here for UCLA moving forward?
So I've done a deep dive on about 7 candidates. So I'll give you the runners up from the top 5, the people that missed the proverbial podium, if you will, when it comes to my candidates for UCLA football. The 2 on the outside looking in, one is very familiar and one is kind of an uprise right now, what's going on in South Florida. I'll start with Alex Golesh. Golesh has been the talk of college football in the state of Florida. 2 ranked wins when it comes to South Florida, including one against Florida in the Swamp a couple weeks ago. Yes, I know they got mopped by Miami last week, but Miami's my favorite to win the ACC. I don't look at that as a negative. Born in Moscow, Russia, he presents an up-tempo spread offense. He's a Josh Heupel disciple coming from that area. Tennessee came down to SEC ties. Maybe that gets him an interview for the job in Florida. He's the guy that beat them, right? And by all accounts, Billy Napier is probably out the door when it comes to the Florida Gators. So it'll be interesting to see what jobs he interviews for. But Golesh, given the uprise of USF, given the 2 ranked wins, you want a coach that comes in with head coaching experience that has rebuilt a program. Golesh is a name that should at least be thrown out in the meeting room, if you will. The other one that just missed the top 5 for me is DeAnton Lynn. DeAnton Lynn, we've known him. He was our defensive coordinator in 2023 when big things happened. We had a top 20 defense in the country. He had, Liatu Latu looking as good as he's ever looked in a UCLA Bruins uniform. Got him to be the first defensive player off the board. The dramatic defensive improvement he put with UCLA was jaw-dropping. It was great. However, he left a bad taste in Bruins' mouth when he went to the school across town at USC, took Kamari Ramsey with him to our prized safety at that, who is, arguably the best defensive player for USC. The reason I would not like this hire is I think it would be a lazy hire at that. It would be somebody that Martin is already in contact with that I think missed the ball when it comes to the UCLA pride and tradition. You can leave for other, defensive coordinator jobs. You had a lot of options. Don't go to USC. That's where I'm at. If you want to come back, don't be a Benedict Arnold. You could do something like that. But for me as a UCLA fan and someone that covers the team, I would not welcome that. Now the top 5 coaches I got for you, Madman. Coming in at number 5, Will Stein, offensive coordinator from Oregon. Talented young OC, 35 years old, Madman, who's been a very solid hire at both Oregon and UTSA. He's nurtured 2 Heisman, candidates with Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel there. And I'll give you just what he's been able to do in terms of total offense at UTSA and Oregon. 14th at UTSA in 2022, which tell me the last time University of Texas and San Antonio has finished in the top 15 when it comes to offense. He's been number 2 in 2023 at Oregon with 44.2 points per game. 17th last year, Dylan Gabriel, and looks to be in the top 5 again this year as he currently sits at number 4. He is the type of guy where if we are trying to find that Sean McVay hire, the guy that the offensive genius, the boy genius at that, I like him the most because I think he has the most complex offense. He combines, pro style, spread, RPO principles into one offense, and it makes it incredibly tough to defend with the talent there. Not to mention he's recruited California very well since he's been at Oregon. So that's a candidate I really like, Madman. Tony White is coming in at number 4 for me. And this is kind of the hot name around the fan base. And Tony White, if you really put in the research and look at what this guy's been able to do at his time at Nebraska and Florida State, is he's taken pretty average defenses and turned them into very elite units. His 3-3-5 stack defense is one of the most difficult to figure out for offensive coordinators across the country. You look at what he's done. So he inherited the Nebraska defense that was 77 before he got there in 2023. He took him to back-to-back top 20 defenses when he was at Nebraska. And he inherited the 87th total defense a year ago at Florida State. He's got them playing the top 20. He's at 14th right now nationally with Florida State. He makes improvements and he does it very, very quickly. The only thing that kind of deters me from a guy like Tony White, who, by the way, 3-year starting linebacker at UCLA on top of this, bleeds blue and gold. And, his nickname on the field was he was basically a coach. You want these type of guys. The only thing that scares me about this, Madman, is you made a great point on this earlier. It's a 2-year rebuild. And for a first-time head coach, I don't know if 2 years is going to be enough, because we're at a point right now where if we miss on this third hire, after the Chip kind of debacle and how that ended to how this DeShaun Foster thing went, if we want UCLA football to be back, and this could be, our final chance to get it right before something, serious happens with the program, given the current state of it, I don't know if he can do it in that short amount of time. So that's my only concern with Tony White and Will Stein for that matter. And then the 3 coaches I have who are current head coaches in college football, I've got Dave Aranda at Baylor, I've got PJ Fleck, and I got Jonathan Smith. And Dave Aranda, for me, Southern California, he's from here, San Bernardino County. You want a rebuilding coach? His first year at Baylor, 2020, 2-7. His second year at Baylor, 12-2, won the Sugar Bowl for Baylor. He's had some rough years. 2022 and 2023 were a little difficult, but he bounced back last year with an 8-win season. The thing I like about Aranda is very smart defensive mind. He was a coordinator defensively for Wisconsin and LSU, and he had them playing in top 5 defenses when he was at both those schools. The thing that scares me, though, is the buyout as of a year ago is about $17 million. It's probably lessened to that point. It's probably around 11, 12 at this point in time, but that's a lot of money to spend for a guy. If we're truly serious about football and Aranda interviews the best out of all these guys, give him the job. But that's kind of my concern, at least with Aranda there. When it comes to PJ Fleck, you want high energy, you want culture building to the highest degree, and you want a guy that's rebuilt programs. Look at Western Michigan and Minnesota. Madman, since 1950, PJ Fleck has the highest winning percentage at the University of Minnesota of any coach that has coached there. He's been to 6 bowl games, Madman. He is 6-0 in those bowl games. He's had 19 players selected to the NFL and 24 Gophers on NFL rosters right now. This guy won a share of the Big Ten West at Minnesota, Madman. And a part of me feels like he's reached his ceiling with the Gophers. Like, you can only go so high with Minnesota. He's had 4 seasons where he's won over 8 games or more there. If you went to UCLA, and I know where we sit right now is a very dark place, but I think we can agree in Southern California, where this recruiting area is so, fruitful, and you can get these type of guys that are difference makers, and you could bring energy back. What UCLA needs more than anything is a guy that can pour energy into this program and get it going. I like PJ Fleck in a lot of ways. I will say his offense is a little vanilla for me. I would like to see an offensive coordinator kind of come in there and see what he could do. But from a discipline standpoint, a development standpoint, an energy standpoint, and culture building standpoint, you could do a hell of a lot worse than what PJ Fleck is doing. $5 million buyout, too, essentially in half of what Dave Aranda is at the very least from what we know. And the number one guy, it's Jonathan Smith, man. Michigan State. I like Jonathan Smith because he's a West Coast guy. Was born in Pasadena. This guy was born to coach at UCLA in the Rose Bowl. Offensive mind, cheaper buyout than Fleck at $3 million, which is very, very crucial. And my top thing, he might be a package deal with Aiden Childs, like one of these star quarterbacks in college football today. He followed him from Oregon State to Michigan State. What happens if he comes west? Maybe Childs, who's from Los Angeles, says, hey, I did my thing with Michigan State. I'm going to follow my coach again. He's put me in a position to win. I like what Jonathan Smith is from an offensive mind. I think he's rebuilt programs, kind of like what Fleck did at Minnesota, a program that has been in turmoil, that is not known for winning. As well as anybody, you win at Oregon State, you're a pretty damn good coach. And he had that 10-win season in 2022. They beat Florida in like the LA Bowl or the Las Vegas Bowl for the first time. He's a quality coach, cheaper buyout than Fleck, offensive mind, California native. He's my number one choice. I know I went on for a long time there, but talk to me about some of these candidates and who you like.
Thriller, I love it. And there was a lot there and so well said. And I'll share with you my
Yeah.
five and then we'll sort of get into it. So we had a lot of similar candidates, no surprise there in terms of what our top five was. For me, the top five was Smith, was Jedfish, was Tony White, was
Okay.
Danton Lynn, and was Will Stein. And then,
Gotcha.
so we were very similar on a few, and then we were different in a few. Thriller, lots to unpack here. Let's start with some of your honorable mentions. Golish, there's a lot to like there, Thriller, for sure.
Yeah.
You said it really, really well. Anytime, his first 2 years at South Florida, Will, were 7-6 and 7-6. I mean, think
Winner.
about the significance there. This is before upsetting Florida in the Swamp. South Florida won 4 games over the 3 years prior to those 2 years of goalless.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about a real turnaround, it's absolutely significant there. The one question for me with goalish is going to be about kind of recruiting and the region, sort of the lack of the Big Ten experience and the lack of sort of West Coast recruiting, especially if we're trying to sort of make a splash here to really revive things. Golish might be a little underwhelming to the casual fan, although individuals like you and me really understand what he can do. So really love Golish, and I really agree with you there on the honorable mention. In terms of Will Stein, Will, you said it best in terms of just the quarterbacks he's been able to produce, the diversity of offense, because that's what you need in the Big Ten. The key in the Big Ten is going to be balance. You have to be able to run the ball. We've talked so much about being able to go inside out. But the teams that separate, who are the teams that ultimately won national championships the last 2 years in terms of Ohio State and Michigan? They could throw the ball when they needed to. Michigan with J.J. McCarthy came up with the big throws when he had to. And then we know about just the litany of weapons that Ohio State has. So you got to be able to run, but you also got to be able to go vertical. Will Stein's diversity of offense really sort of aligns there. And Will, he was at UTSA before Oregon for 3 years. 1 year was the COVID year. So, that's a little bit of a wash there. They still found a way to win 7 games. But the 2 full seasons, Will, 23 wins at UTSA over 2 years. 15-1 in conference. And that's what really propelled him to that Oregon job. What I love about Stein, he's young, he's innovative. He understands the Big Ten. He understands West Coast recruiting. So many boxes are sort of checked there. In terms of Lynn and Tony White, Will, both very similar, right? Defensive guys, defensive gurus, individuals that have taken situations where teams have been 80th, 90th, 100th in defense, and within 1 year been able to go top 20. Tony White bleeds UCLA. Point well taken about Danton and this sort of flipping back and forth. So I totally hear you there. I will say sources are suggesting that the folks close to the UCLA program and the folks that are on this selection committee that Chancellor Julio Frank has sort of announced around Martin Jarman. So there's going to be the search firm as well as this sort of selection committee. A lot of folks on this selection committee will feel highly about Lynn. So I think Lynn's going to get a deep look. But to your point about the rivalry, really well noted there. And then, Will, in terms of Jonathan Smith, what more is there to be said? You talk about someone, Southern California ties. He wants to be a Bruin. Yeah. He turned around Oregon State to a 10-win team. And what I love here, Will, is the buyout number of $3 million. His buyout was actually, it's huge. It's huge. It was $7 million. But that was predicated on the athletic director who hired him to stay in the job. Michigan State has changed athletic directors since Jonathan Smith got the job. So that buyout number has gone from 7 to 3, and Jonathan Smith just checks all the boxes of what you need. Preeminent kind of head coaching experience, the ability to turn programs around. He knows how to recruit. He's really good X's and O's. He knows how to hire coordinators. He just checks all of the boxes there. To me, Will, the other candidate that, you really desire is, of course, Jedfish. And we've talked about Jedfish so much. Another individual who bleeds UCLA, who would walk to UCLA if he could, to be honest with you. And just the turnaround that he did at Arizona was nothing short of staggering, Will. I mean, 1 win in his first season. And by year 3, 10 wins and an Alamo Bowl victory. I mean, absolutely sensational. The only blemish, the only issue with Jedd Fisch, and it's a point that you mentioned earlier, it's the buyout. His buyout right now is sitting at 10 to 11 million right now. And for a school that has gotten into a deficit because of dead money to coaches, I think it's going to be a relatively hard sell to go to the chancellor, to go to the selection committee and say, we just bought out DeShaun for 7.5. We're going to go buy out Jedd Fisch for, let's call it 11. That's 18.5 million now in buyout money before anyone is actually paid to be the coach. Now, unless a Casey Wasserman, unless another mega booster says, look, I'm personally going to take care of this. And there are people out there at UCLA that certainly have the means to do so. I just think that's going to be a harder institutional sell. And then, Thriller, I think the last two that you laid out there in terms of Aranda and PJ Fleck, it's very interesting because I didn't have those two on my top 5, but your points are so well taken and really well analyzed. The one question I have about Aranda, and you alluded to it, he had tremendous success year 2 in Baylor, and then it sort of flattened out a little bit. And so you wonder sometimes when situations like that arise, is he able to recruit? Because, that first 2 years, you're playing with the previous coach's players, right? And at that point, this was sort of pre-NIL blowing up, pre-transfer portal blowing up. So he had that great success year 2, but then the fact that it sort of dropped off, it makes you wonder, where I think Aranda needs one more big year at Baylor, I think, to really sort of be preeminent again, just in my mind. That's my one question. Is he able to truly build a program from scratch from a recruiting standpoint, or was he able to sort of inherit a pretty decent situation? And once those talented guys became experienced enough, he was able to win. And then when he had to reset the board again, he's been struggling a little bit. So that's my one question about Aranda. And then the last point, Will, I'll say is, in terms of Fleck, my God, everything you said was absolutely spot on. And I think he would be a real jolt for this program. My one question about PJ Fleck, and I'll pose it to you, is PJ Fleck the Mick Cronin of college football?
Ooh.
Where, he's able to get the most out of 3-star kids and 4-star kids, and he's able to sort of maximize the talent that is available to him. But is PJ Fleck going to be able to coach those West Coast 4 and 5-star kids? You can only go so far with those 3-4-star kids and kind of play the development game. You're in a recruiting hotbed in Southern California. It's a very different skill set. It's a very different personality type. I'm not saying he can't do it, but it's just a question for me. And I don't know if I've seen enough evidence that he can. And so that's where Fleck didn't fall in my top 5, because there's a lot of Mick Cronin to him in terms of the college football side. So I'll pause there. Thriller, your thoughts?
You know what? I think he would, and I'll tell you why. Cronin, when he loses or when he's upset, is a very negative coach. And we talked about it last year. Was he too harsh? Was he too critical with some of these kids? He is a hard ass in the truest sense. And, I think a lot of America needs that right now in a lot of regards. I think we're too soft on some of these kids growing up and, some of those matters. But where PJ Fleck differs is this guy might be the most positive coach in college football. You never see him blame anybody else. He is so positive. You know what he brings to mind, which is a great UCLA coach? He has a lot of Dick Vermeil in him. He's kind of wired in that positive sense. You might remember this. When Trent Green went down for the Rams in 99, Dick Vermeil goes, we got this guy in Kurt Warner. He's going to shock some people. We're going to make some things. That positivity and his belief in his players, no way Warner is a Hall of Famer at this point, and no way are they Super Bowl champions. And I think Fleck, from a positivity standpoint, from everything I've seen, from what he's done at Western Michigan, remember, this guy had them in the top 5, Western Michigan. That will never happen again in my lifetime. I would bet my entire life savings on that. And like we said, Minnesota is the Oregon State of the Big Ten. It just has been that way for as long as I can remember. The only player I can remember at a college before Fleck got there was the likes of Marion Barber at Minnesota, if you remember that.
That's right.
I think what he's done there is not talked about enough. And I do think he needs to be more innovative when it comes to scheming and things like that. But for what this program needs right now, and it needs so much energy, so much enthusiasm to kind of bring the depths back out. Man, did you see the crowd at that, game against New Mexico State? That was embarrassing, man. We need someone that can get people in the seats and can fire up this fan base. And I think he has the mindset, the energy, and the ability to do that. And listen, you know me, man. Nobody is as big of a fan as Jedd Fisch as me. In fact, I'm going to share my screen real quick to show you what my opinion was back at this date, Madman. Look at this, November 17th, 2023. If the UCLA athletic department in charge of hiring does the right thing, the social team at UCLA will run this same graphic in a few weeks with a different title. My top candidate for UCLA, if they do indeed move on from Chip. I love Jedd Fisch. I got to be honest with you. Right now, as it stands, and I'm just being a realist. I know some UCLA fans may get on me for this, may hate on me for this, but it's just the truth. Washington is a better job right now than UCLA. We had our chance at him. I truly believe if we had fired Chip in that November period, Jedd Fisch could be a UCLA football head coach, depending on how that hiring process went. But this team, Washington, just went to a national championship less than 24 months ago. They've had NFL top 10 draft picks, galore. It's just, I don't foresee Fisch leaving for UCLA right now. And that hurts me to say that, but it's just the truth right now in college football. If we got him when he was leaving Arizona, I believe he'd be a Bruin. I just don't see him leaving the Huskies.
No, Thriller, I think it's a really good point because A, I think you're right. And B, it comes down to that buyout piece as well, right? And so we have to look at who is attainable as well as who is desirable, right? It's the intersection of those two things. And that's also why, it's sort of fun to talk about. We've seen it in some message boards and on Twitter of the likes of like Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney or Lane Kiffin.
Jimbo.
Look, that's not reality, and obviously Saban is retired and, that's a whole different ballgame. But think about this, Thriller. Dabo Swinney's buyout is $60 million right now. Lane Kiffin's buyout is $40 million right now. Dabo Swinney had a press conference earlier this week. I'm sure you saw it about, Clemson fans and, the 1-2 start and has Swinney lost his fastball and so on and so forth. He gave all these stats, playoff 7 out of 10 years, conference championship 8 out of 10 years. But he said something that was interesting where he said, if you don't like winning, you can send me on my way and then I'll go find another job. And I thought that language was so precise because these guys are not incentivized in any way, shape, or form to actively be looking for a job when you have those buyouts. You'd rather get fired, get the money, and then go look for that other job. And you'd probably want to be in a situation where perhaps it's not that much of a rebuild. So it's fun to talk about those names, but we have to look at what is attainable given the parameters that we are working with. And Thriller, I loved your point about PJ Fleck. I vividly remember that Dick Vermeil press conference. He was in tears, if you recall. And he said, we're going to rally around Kurt Warner. But I think, Thriller, you and I, we had some differences in our top 5 and some honorable mentions. But I think it's fair to say you and I are converging on the same number 1 candidate. It's Jonathan Smith for both of us at number 1.
Yes, man. He is. I think he would be the crown jewel of this. The buyout aligns very clearly. I am worried because he's off to a 3-0 start at Michigan State. So they're incentivized, and I think they've got a better package when it comes to the athletic department right now in terms of rewarding coaches. I mean, Mel Tucker flamed out, but he got a ton of money there. They had the money to pony up in Lansing for something to go on like that. But if Jonathan Smith, let's say he goes 7-6 this year, and it's not going exactly to plan, I could easily see him jumping ship. And it's the buyout's low. He's from California. He doesn't strike me as a guy that wants to stay in the Midwest. I think he's a guy that would easily come home. And what better place to do it at UCLA? We've seen you. We've seen you be the underdog in your state at Oregon. When you had Oregon State rolling at a high level, you could do it here in Southern California at UCLA and put us back on top. And I also want to bring another factor into this. I think it's a hard job for UCLA to hire some of these guys because for instance, if Dave Aranda, let's say he finishes the season well and he gets a job offer to stay at Baylor compared to coming to UCLA, you got to factor in the taxes here. There's no income tax in the state of Texas. So if he's getting a $10 million deal there and a $10 million UCLA, it's about cut in half coming to UCLA. And we know LA's expensive, man. Doing it in Waco, Texas, you can live like a king out there and save some money for your family down the line. So it's a harder job than you would think to hire, given the finances of how difficult it is to live in California at a high level. So
no question, Thriller.
Yeah.
Really well said. And I think why we really like Jonathan Smith is combination of proven experience and success rebuilding a program, number one. Yeah. Number two, deep West Coast and UCLA ties. Let's not forget he's a West Coast guy, but his parents went to UCLA, so he's sort of a Bruin through his family and a Bruin by blood, number two. And then I think number three, I think that ability to recruit of the geographic footprint that UCLA is looking for across the country from a Big Ten perspective. And I think his ability to hire assistant coaches and coordinators, I think is very, very high. And then again, you're in a situation here where the buyout is very manageable, right? If a $3 million buyout, that was in the initial show I gave this week. And I said, UCLA is going to have to focus more from the coordinator side because these buyouts are so high with these coaches. But in Jonathan Smith is the one exception here. Because that athletic director swap happened at Michigan State, you're only looking at a $3 million buyout. Now you can go to a mega booster and say, hey, can you cover this piece of the buyout for us to be able to move forward? So to me, Thriller, I think you've got it. Smith and Fleck kind of as your top two. For me, I've got kind of three in my top group. I've got Smith, I've got White, and I've got Lynn sort of in my top three. But I think it's going to be fascinating, Thriller, to see how all of this shakes out. And I think the other thing that we have to be mindful of as UCLA fans and the UCLA community is two things. One, this is going to be a longer process, right? Yeah. I mean, let's not forget, it's not like a UCLA head coach is going to be named in 48 hours or this week. This is going to be an end of November hire. Anytime a coach gets fired, you sort of mid-season or early season, it's not like the replacement is named in a few days. It's still going to be sort of an end of season timeline. So we have to monitor this with a little bit more of a longer term lens, number one. And then number two, I think as much as these candidates are going to be interviewed by UCLA, I think UCLA is going to have to be doing some interviewing of their own in terms of selling the vision moving forward. What's the vision of the football program? What is the emphasis of the football program? What are the resources of the football program? Where are priorities going to stack up? And how is actually success defined in terms of UCLA football? So I think those are going to be the questions that each of these candidates is going to have moving forward. And so I think the homework on the Bruins side is going to have to be, these are our resources. This is how we're committed. These are our priorities. This is our vision for success. This is how we want to get here. And this is why we believe you are that right fit. So I think those are the two things we got to look at as well, Thriller. Timeline, but also not only is UCLA doing the interviewing, but they're going to be interviewed too. And so the Bruins need to be ready to be able to answer that and also put a strategy together to be able to execute that.
I don't think it's hyperbole to say this is the biggest hire UCLA football's had since Terry Donahue left, in the late 80s, early 90s. The program, it feels there's a lot at stake here right now, given how this Foster tenure ended, given how the Chip Kelly tenure ended. We talked about the Mora years. Yes, he was very successful, but you mentioned it. USC was on sanctions. This is huge for UCLA football moving forward. And if you nail this hire, this could bring back all the joy, all the passion, all the success that this fan base, if you're over the age of 40, has experienced throughout their lifetime. And I'm excited to see what that happens and just see how this interview process goes, because this fan base deserves it, man. I'm ready to see the Bruin fans loud and proud again at the Rose Bowl for a team that they can just tip their hat to and, buy season tickets with and get excited about.
Get excited about, indeed, Thriller. So well said. And I think to your point, Will, about why this is so important And Tracy Pearson of Bruin Report Online shared this over the weekend. And it's about the landscape of college football also going to be changing in 2030. When you think about the new media rights deal for the Big Ten, the media rights deal for the Big Ten is going to be up in 2030. There's a lot of conversation right now about the playoff expanding from 12 to 16 to possibly higher. But in 2030, the confluence of all of these media rights deals ending, there's even talk about doing sort of a super league, right? A 32-team super league, and the teams that are sort of most committed to football in that 32-team super league, and then there's going to be maybe a second league. And so it's going to be really important. Now, all of those things are aspirational. They're conceptual right now. They're esoteric right now, but they're out there. And so this hire is so fundamental to UCLA's success because, like we said, 2026 is going to be a wash. That first year is a total rebuild. And then you're starting from 2027 onwards. 2027 to 2030 is only 3 to 4 seasons. So it really is going to come down to this coach is going to be able to take UCLA football where it needs to be and is going to have that barometer there in 2030 when a lot of these media rights decisions are made, a lot of conference realignment decisions are made, league realignments decisions are made. And so that's why this is so paramount. And Thriller, we are so excited about what's to come. We're going to have a full heart. We're going to have a full mind. We're going to sort of look at this and monitor it. And fans, we got you totally covered on anything and everything that drops. Thriller, before we sign out and sort of pay the bills, anything you want to share with the audience before we sign out on another great one?
Man, keep the faith, UCLA fans. I think if we put the time and effort that we have available to us for this coaching search, I think we're really going to find a strong candidate that has a chance to get us back to where we're going. And stay with us, like and subscribe to this podcast, guys. We're not going anywhere. This show is a big, big deal to us week in and week out, and I hope it is to you guys as well. So we're keeping the faith. We're going to wait to see who this new hire is, and we're going to judge accordingly when that happens. So stay with us, keep the faith, and keep tuning into the Madman and Thriller here week in and week out.
Love it, Thriller. Absolutely. And so before we sign off, hey, we got to pay the bills for the show around here. You guys have seen the Sleeper ad now for a couple of episodes. And ever heard of the Sleeper app? Here's a little secret. It's more than just a platform for season-long fantasy leagues. This year, millions of users enjoyed playing fantasy sports on Sleeper, but the app offers so much more. Live stats, real-time updates, and visualization on all stats. Newsfeed, get lightning-fast updates on your favorite players and teams, along with the real-time chat. Engage with other users about individual plays and performances during the NFL and NBA seasons. Download the #1 sports app today and experience it for yourself and use promo code UCLA LAFB. Well, fans, another great one in the books. Your dynamic duo is going to have you covered for everything UCLA related, both on the field, off the field, coaching searches, and the likes. And as we always say, be loud, be proud, be passionate, Bruins. Bruin football will rise again. And as always, 4's up forever.